Hello, and welcome to another edition of the More Than Able podcast. I'm Margie, and I'm here today with three very important people in my life. We have my mom, Anne, and my stepdad, Tracy, joining us in the studio. And we have my dad, Scott, joining us over Zoom. Hi, guys. Thank you for being here today. It means a lot to me.
Hey, thanks for having us, Margie.
Hey, Marge. Thanks.
Good morning, Tiger. Thank you so much.
All right. So the point of this interview is I want you as the listeners to hear from my family as to how my journey with hydrocephalus started and the continuation that it's had and the impact it's had on my life. And so that's why I have asked these three to join me in studio and over Zoom today. So, Mom and Dad, let me start with you guys. Kind of take me to the beginning a little bit, not the very, very beginning, but but when you first kind of started noticing, I don't want to say that something was wrong, but there was something different about this journey of first-time parenthood that you guys were about to embark on.
Sure, maybe I'll start with that one. When you were in utero, Margie, well, first of all, I had toxemia, preeclampsia, and HELLP syndrome, and I don't know really what effect that had on your hydrocephalus, but I knew in utero that you weren't kicking me, and my sister Kathy was pregnant at the same time, so we could compare notes. So I pretty much knew that there was something wrong, but it didn't make a difference to me. I, would just continue on doing what I was doing to be, as healthy as I could be, and that was the early on. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Dad, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, when your mom had that preeclampsia, when she was pregnant with you, we had to go to Kmart and get some shoes for her because she couldn't have any shoes that fits because her feet got so dang big. It was, I'll never forget it. And then when you were born in Cleveland, your mom was really sick. But as far as when you started noticing things, your head started getting bigger. That's the first thing I remember is your head started getting bigger.
And it wasn't because I was retaining knowledge, of course.
Man, you're pretty darn smart as it is.
Well, thanks, Dad.
But I don't think, I think when we got your diagnosis, I don't think Scott or I knew really anything about hydrocephalus. I mean, we were completely shocked. So
Totally agree. Yep.
When we brought you home from the hospital, Margie, we had no idea that there was anything wrong until you started to scream every time we would lay you down, and then there was a lot of vomiting. So we took you to the pediatrician. Pediatrician started noticing that your head was getting a little bit bigger, so sent us down to Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital in Cleveland, and that's where they determined after MRIs and CT scans, not in that order, of course, that you had hydrocephalus and agenesis of the corpus callosum. So when we first talked to the medical doctors about your diagnosis, I think we were super confused by the information and the language that they used. It was something we had never heard. And so along with the diagnosis comes a whole lot of unfamiliar medical terms. So after we grew more familiar with them, this knowledge gave us the ability to navigate through the next steps. So your dad and I were sort of warriors after that.
Well, to be honest, Ann, you were the warrior. I was I was working at the time, and I'll never forget when they pulled us into a room. They brought a social worker in, and they started to explain kind of the different things that might happen to Margie and how her life might go about. And I'll never forget, Margie, your mom said, she just put an end to that right there. She said, we're not going to put limitations on this young, beautiful girl right now. And that's really what kind of started us to move from Cleveland back to Minneapolis, is that your mom was so determined to not put any limitations on what the hydrocephalic condition and anything else that might go along with it was going to do. So if we were both warriors, it was your mom that was the charge warrior, and I was following suit. But that's how we got to Minnesota, basically.
And Marge, you had asked us earlier, how did we react to the diagnosis? And, we were sad, we were fearful. There was a lot of uncertainty. But we just knew that the most important thing was right in front of us, and that was you. So even though we had feelings of sadness and we were grieving and we had a huge fear of the future, we were parents of a wonderful, beautiful child that needed us. So we were, we came together. Even though your dad says he was working, he was very much a part of the next steps, keeping me, together, and it was all positive.
Wow. Amazing. And Tracy, I want to bring you into this, even though you kind of came in later. From a doctor's perspective, had you heard of hydrocephalus, and have you seen many cases of it?
Yeah, Margie, I'm an ER doc and have worked in medicine for 33 years and have seen a number of cases of hydrocephalus. I started out as a family doctor and delivered a lot of babies, and may have had a case of hydrocephalus in my patients when I was delivering babies and taking care of families, but then switched to emergency medicine. In the emergency room, we'll see patients coming in with hydrocephalus that will have headaches or they're vomiting, and at different ages, can be younger children to adults that still have a VP shunt in, and we will have to do a shunt series, and I will often probably every time we'll contact the neurologist and get their opinion once we get the x-rays and try to determine if the shunt is functioning. So I am quite familiar with it. I certainly am not a surgeon and can't manage it long term, but I do see it on a regular basis.
Wow, thank you. And so, Mom, kind of walk me through, and Dad, you can chime in too. Walk me through when I first started school and how that process went.
Ooh, entering a whole new world of unknowns, Marge. So I think, after we got back to Minneapolis, it was 6 or 8 years of in and out of the hospital. So they revised your shunt. You had some GI problems. We had many nights, go lightly nights, trying to fix the GI problems. So we were in and out, but you were such a trooper. And I think, after things had sort of calmed a little bit in your body and we had a better idea of what was going on, I just started talking to a lot of people and finding out more about specialized services, because that was going to be the next step. So I listened to a lot of professionals and anyone who give me advice on the next step. So early intervention was the term we heard a lot. We got you into physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, a lot of sensory integration practices. Gillette Children's, where they specialize in brain and bone movement, because you were having a hard time walking. Remember, you were in not a walker, but a walking frame that you had to stand up straight in. Do you remember that, Scott?
Yeah, she did. I remember the picture from the St. John's house downstairs with her in the walker. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Dad, you put that picture in a photo book that you gave me, I remember.
That's correct.
Yep. So Then we also brought on board a psychologist who you've had for, I don't know, how long have you been senior psychologist?
Since I was 8.
And that was
I
huge.
believe.
She's made a huge impact on you, Margie, for so long. She's on speed dial, of course. Then I think we started out, in hand?
Mm-hmm.
And so you started your schooling, and then was it early childhood special education? That was hand in hand. You'll have to remind me.
Yeah, and then from there, I moved on to elementary school, where I had wonderful teachers and a great special education team.
Mm-hmm.
That consisted of a resource room teacher, paraprofessionals, speech therapist, and a psychologist and a school psychologist, and that kind of, I feel like, went on throughout like my middle school and my high school years too.
Mm-hmm. So I think the most important thing was lining up those services, and early intervention was very important. That made a big difference. Then from there, you were over at the middle school in Edina and their special education program over there, which was amazing.
Yes.
And then the playbook changed. Then you were off to high school, and it was quite different than the early childhood special education and then middle school. The high school was a whole different deal. The services were.
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the folks that listen to this might be interested in knowing that maybe they could learn from us. And Margie, you were so young, you weren't privy to this, but I think one of the things that in the long run has benefited Margie the greatest, and all of us to some degree, is that we didn't know how to deal with Margie's condition as parents at a very, very young age when we moved back to Minnesota. So I just wanted to fill the gap to how, your mother and I got divorced. And basically it was a function of, we didn't know how to deal. I was working, your mom was running around everywhere, every doctor. We were in and out of hospitals. And to those folks that might be listening, dealing with a medical situation with a young child is not easy. And I think in retrospect, we could have handled a lot differently. That being said, the outcome we have today and the things that you've been and the young lady that you've become is awesome. It's a testament to your mom, certainly to Tracy over the last quite a few years. But I just wanted to bridge the gap before the school thing started. Margie, your mother and I got divorced when you were very, very young. So we became, the main burden of your raising was on your mom. And then as the school came along, we weren't sure how schooling was going to be, but I'm very thankful for Minnesota and the fact that mainstream schools accept kids that have challenges, and you were certainly accepted 100% in the school. So I just wanted to bridge that gap up to where you guys were starting to go into high school.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Dad.
Yeah, and there's so much more that goes along with that. And Scott, you're right. I said, one of the things we started learning about the importance of the disability laws, and that applied to you on the national and state level, and programs through the county, the waivers, the social workers, the agencies. That's kind of what your dad was talking about. There was so many things that we had to learn and get you all set up for. And we were blessed to have found so many wonderful people that supported us through your journey, not only through Edina Public Schools, but just outside of that, the support that we had from our families was huge. And then just the podcast now, Margie, and the Learnability Network, another agency that we, for a long time, we didn't do anything. And we just kind of, you've been busy doing your volunteer jobs. So we've been very blessed, with everybody who has supported us and all the things you've been able to do.
Well, and Mom, talking about my jobs, I was thinking about this today and how I wanted to kind of go about that. And I remember I would go out and try and be my best self, trying to find a job. And I would just come home and I'd be like, okay, this isn't working. Like, and you stepped up and you said, okay, I got you in with these 2 hospitals. We're going to go, we're going to interview. It's going to be great. And here I am 7 years later, and I'm working my butt off. And now I have another job that I've started working at that I love. And so, I mean, with the support of all of you, that's been really huge. So thank you. So, Tracy, now we move on to you. So, you came in to the picture about 10 years ago, was it?
Yes, it was.
And so you already kind of talked about how it was kind of coming in to this, I don't want to say situation, but this new relationship. Talk a little more about that.
Well, Margie, I met your mom, and it was one of those things where 2 people come together and there's magic right away with interests and discussion and talking. It all came so easily, and we became close very quickly and discovered that this is something that we wanted to look at long term. And then I learned about you fairly quickly. As soon as I met Ann, I knew that she had a daughter with some unique differences, and I learned about it. And with my medical knowledge, I did know about hydrocephalus and understood that. And I remember the first time I met you was at Panera Bread. I came in my scrubs, and I remember the drink we had. That was a tea, and we had dinner or lunch, and I was so impressed with you, with your hydrocephalus and your agenesis of the corpus callosum and the struggles you had over the years. I quickly became very fond of you and attached to you very quickly early on in the relationship. So I knew as I went forward with this journey, both Ann and I were single at the time and divorced, but single in our later midlife. And so looking at a new chapter in our life, I knew that you were going to be a very integral part of my life going forward. And I embraced it from the very moment I met you, and knew that this was going to be a wonderful relationship, and I wanted to learn more. And I believe, Ann, I asked you a lot of questions, things that I didn't understand about the other side of it. I take care of patients. They may have hydrocephalus and issues with it or vomiting, and often the parents know more about it than I do when they come in, and I'll ask them questions. But as I learned about the social side of the things, I would often ask Ann, help me understand, why Margie may say this or have this limitation, so I can understand it better, so I can help her in these areas. And I'm hoping as we've grown together as a family, as we got married in 2015, and I became a part of your life even more intimately moving into the house, that I've wanted to help a new set of eyes in the setting to help you with some life skills and some things to even expand your horizons further. And hopefully I've done that by challenging you, because I agree with what Scott said earlier, that people wanted to put limitations on you. Some of the doctors said you may never walk or talk again. And your mom and dad just said, nope, that's not the way it's going to be. There's no limits for you. And I believe that, Margie, and I still believe that there are things that you're going to do and accomplish in your life that maybe we would never even imagine 5 years ago. And you've exceeded so many people's expectations and probably your own. and you're doing beautifully. And I'm just blessed to be a part of your lives.
Well, thank you.
Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy, for saying that. And I feel like our family has just become like a wonderful blended modern family. And there's another key person in my life who I know I should have asked her, but she's working today, and that would be my stepmom, Susan. So, Dad, how was that for you, kind of meeting her and kind of bringing her into like our life?
Well, I'd like to jump back and ask the esteemed Dr. Powell about if you could define what magic is.
Well, Scott, we'll talk about that off the air.
Well, Margie, you wouldn't remember this, but you were 3 or 4 when I first started dating Susan. I still play a lot of golf. You would come over on a Friday night, and we would go to the club and have dinner, and then on Saturday she would come over, and you two would hang out for 3 or 4 or 5 hours when I played golf. So Susan became very attached to you at a young age, and then as things progressed, I think in natural ways, she just wasn't as close to you for, just because she wasn't around you as much. But to talk more about Tracy, the best thing that ever happened to you, I can say to Ann too, and to this whole relationship in totality, was when Tracy came into the picture 10 years ago. Now, that doesn't mean that your health care got better. It naturally did because you had a doctor in the house. But I think that where we are at today, compared to where we were 10, 15 years ago, is in a much, much better place. And a big part of that is that, Tracy came into the picture. And for that, I'm super duper thankful.
That's great, Dad. Thank you. So,
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. That's nice.
You bet. No, you don't have to thank me. You guys are the ones that are awesome. Go ahead, Marge. Ask away.
So, I want to talk more about our extended family and how you guys feel they reacted with the diagnosis and just the relationships. And I can speak a little more on the relationships too that have formed within our families, but
Well, I would say, my family, when you were diagnosed, Margie, my grandpa said, "You're coming back to Minneapolis." So Scott left his job. We moved back to Minneapolis, and Dad said, I've got you all lined up with the director of pediatric neurosurgery at the University of Minnesota. And we came back to Minnesota, and that started our journey there. You had your shunt placed at the University of Minnesota, and then you started with Dr. Naguib at Children's Hospital. And the whole time, being back in Minnesota was huge for us because we had my family there. And everybody was super supportive, from grandma, grandpa, my sister Kathy. Everybody fell in love with you the minute that they met you, number one. And so to answer your question, I'm kind of going around it. Everybody was super supportive and would have done anything for you and for us to help us navigate through, the unknown. And, this is something that you have no control over. And all we could do was just get out there and, do the best we could do. And we're blessed that in Minnesota we have wonderful medical care. So Dad and Grandpa knew a lot of people in the field, and so that was super helpful. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And Dad, with your family, it was a little bit different because they were out of state from where we were and are. So,
Right. Well, we just got back from a family reunion, so I think how my family has accepted you and everything that happened is pretty self-evident by how close you are on Facebook and when we go to reunions and such. I think that my extended family had a little more, if you want to say, experience with understanding and seeing people that have unique challenges. Ann's family, I don't think, had that as much, and it is what it is. But I think, both families have, both families would probably say that they're lucky that you're in their life, Margie. So I think that's probably the highest compliment is that you bring sunshine to every room that you're in and every family that you're around. And we're all, it's your world, sweetie. We're lucky to be in.
well, thank you, Dad. So, I want to wrap this up by opening it up to you three. There may be parents or step parents out there listening right now who are where we were 30 or 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I want you guys, if you would, to just give, do you have any advice for any families that are going through these unique difference challenges and everything?
Well, I think all kids when they're born and they get a diagnosis, I think they're, you guys write your own book. You can be told that your child's never going to walk or talk, or your child's going to have this limitation, or your child's going to, this is what's going to happen in 10 years. I don't think anybody really knows. And that was some of the best advice I received from early on from one of my dad's very good friends. Pulled me aside, and he has some daughter with some unique challenges, and he said, Annie, listen, she's going to write her own book. Just get the early intervention going, surround yourself with a lot of support, and just and the other important thing was to take care of myself, because it, over the years, there's so much information that's thrown at you. And I ended up, really heeding that advice, and it was some of the best advice I got, and that I would encourage parents to just reach out and get support. I know the Hydrocephalus Association is an amazing place to go and get help and support and advice. And I'm sure there's some others that you know of, Margie. And I'm really proud of you. You not only, you asked me a question the other day about, do you remember how you started educating me about hydrocephalus and about my diagnosis? And, that's a baby step kind of thing. But as you got older, you absolutely dove into it. And you learned so much more than I could have ever taught you. And I'm so proud of that. And I do appreciate so much the Learnability Network, and Jasmine and the whole team and all the gals that you work with, and this podcast, how much you've learned from other people, not only about yourself, but what you're going to learn from the Hydrocephalus Association interviews, all the interviews you have coming up, you're going to learn so much more. And I'm very, very proud of you.
Thank you, Mom. Dad or Tracy?
Morning, Tracy.
Well, coming into this blended, now we have a wonderful blended family. And Scott, you've been such a good friend, and I've seen what a great dad you are, and Susan as an amazing stepmom. I think there's always challenges when you come into a blended family with relationships. And I would just challenge people, when you have a child, adult child or younger child with some unique differences and the challenges that go along with it, that's the priority. It's not about your differences as adults and divorced parents. It's about coming together as a village. You know, they say it takes a village to raise a child, and I think you have to put those aside, and you have to put that child and into the priority lane and take care of those needs and work together. And I've seen you two do that. And have you butted heads occasionally? Sure, that's, that happens, and we all do that. But you guys have worked together, and I've seen a beautiful thing here with Margie and the development of her, and coming into this, I've embraced it. And if you're coming into a relationship where you have a stepchild with unique differences, and whatever it may be, whether it's hydrocephalus or some other challenge, embrace it, learn about it, come in with a new perspective and say, what can I do? How can I understand it more and learn about it? Because that's what I've done with Anne, is asked her about this, and how is it that this affects Margie when she's walking, maybe some of the depth perception issues? How can I support this? And so I would just challenge you to, you don't have to be best friends, which we're really doggone good friends here. But maybe it's not that close, but when it comes to your child, stick together. I've seen it in the ER. I've seen step-parents come together and rally around their child. And look at the beautiful product we have with Margie. And I'm just so blessed to be a part of this. And I want to continue to learn about it and encourage Margie to continue to grow.
All right, Dad, that leaves you.
Well, what Ann and Tracy both said are all spot on, and I agree with a ton. If I would, if there's a couple of things maybe that I've learned over the years in this, number one is to not be afraid to lean on other people that have been through these things, and I've heard you all talk about this. But learning things in life doesn't mean that you have to go through it as much as you can also, lean on other people that have been through it. And that being said, Tracy mentioned something that hit me real close when he said that he listens to parents when they come in because oftentimes they know better. And that's spot on, because Ann, 99.9% of the time, knew better and knew how to diagnose Margie before the doctor did. And my advice to parents that might be going through something like this is always trust your intuition with your child. If you're with that child 24/7, you know what's good, bad, or indifferent for your kid. And I think one of the reasons that Margie, you have turned out so awesome, is that your mom always pushed the boundaries and never, if she didn't agree with the doctor, she told him. And if we wanted, and not only did she tell him, but we would go see another doctor. I think that's one of the biggest things I learned, is that the parents, especially the mom, usually knows best. It sounds like a cliche phrase, but in this case, Margie, you're lucky to have your mom, because she didn't let any boundaries stop you from being the wonderful young lady that you are. And as Tracy said, we're lucky to have this blended family, and I feel super duper happy about where we're at in life, especially in regards to bringing you up and setting you on your journey.
Well, thank you, Dad. Tracy, do you have any final thoughts?
No, thank you for having us on and
Yes.
being able to be a part of this part of your story.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Margie.
Well,
Thank you.
well, you're welcome. Thank you, Mom and Tracy and Dad, for taking the time to be on this episode of the More Than Able podcast today. And everybody, just remember, you're more than able.